There are moments in the life of a monarchy that appear, on the surface, to be nothing more than procedural housekeeping. A quiet amendment passed through Parliament, a name added to a list, a ceremony adjusted to accommodate logistics. And then, when you step back and look at what those changes actually mean in practice, you realize you are watching something far more significant unfold, something that will reshape the institution for decades to come. This is one of those moments. King Charles III has done something that has left royal historians, constitutional lawyers, and the British public in a state of quiet astonishment. He has made a deliberate and calculated move to place Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, his only sister, a woman who has spent more than half a century working in the shadows of the family spotlight, at the very center of royal constitutional power. And the more you understand about what that actually means, the more stunning it becomes. To understand the full weight of this decision, you first have to understand the legal architecture that governs the British monarchy when the sovereign is unable to perform their duties. The relevant framework comes from the Regency Acts, legislation that dates back to 1937 and has been amended only a handful of times since. Under these acts, when the king is either absent from the United Kingdom or temporarily incapacitated by illness, a group of senior royals known as Councillors of State are empowered to step in and carry out most of the monarch's official duties on his behalf. We are talking about attending Privy Council meetings, granting royal assent to legislation, signing official state documents, and receiving the credentials of new ambassadors to the court of St. James's. This is not ceremonial window dressing. This is the actual machinery of the British state operating in the monarch's name. For most of Charles's reign, the pool of working councillors of state was dangerously thin. The law stipulated that the position went automatically to the monarch's spouse and the next 4 adults in the line of succession domiciled in the United Kingdom. When Charles ascended the throne in September 2022, that pool included Queen Camilla, Prince William, Prince Harry, Prince Andrew, and Princess Beatrice. The problem, as anyone paying attention immediately recognized, was that 3 of those 5 people were entirely unsuitable for the role in practice. Prince Harry had relocated to California and stepped back from royal duties entirely. Prince Andrew had been stripped of his royal roles following a cascade of personal scandals. Princess Beatrice is not a working member of the royal family and carries none of the institutional weight the role would demand. King Charles saw this clearly and moved with surprising speed and decisiveness to fix it. In November 2022, he sent a personal message signed by his own hand to both houses of Parliament. That message, read aloud in the House of Lords by the Lord Chamberlain, formally requested that Parliament amend the Regency Acts to add 2 new permanent councillors of state, Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, and Prince Edward, now the Duke of Edinburgh. The bill moved through Parliament with unusual velocity and received royal assent on the 6th of December, 2022, coming into force the very next day as the Councillors of State Act 2022. There is a detail buried inside that legislation that most commentators glossed over at the time, but which tells you everything about Charles's intentions. Anne and Edward were not added to the list the same way Harry, Andrew, and Beatrice sit on it, technically eligible but practically irrelevant. Charles had them added as permanent, lifetime councillors of state. The language of the Act specifically ensures that they remain eligible to serve for the rest of their lives, regardless of shifts in the line of succession. This was not a temporary fix. This was a structural realignment. And at the center of that realignment was Princess Anne. Now, ask yourself this. Why Anne? Why not simply rely on William and Camilla, the 2 most prominent figures in the working royal family, to share the administrative burden when Charles is unavailable? The answer to that question reveals something profound about the internal dynamics of the House of Windsor and about the extraordinary, largely unheralded position that Princess Anne occupies within it. Consider first the raw record of her service. According to multiple independent tallies of royal engagements, Princess Anne has consistently led the entire royal family in the number of official duties performed each year. In 2017, the year the data was most comprehensively reported, she carried out more official engagements than any other working royal, including the Queen herself. She has now completed well over 20,000 engagements since she began undertaking public duties in her early adulthood. She has been patron of dozens of organizations, many of them in areas of real social complexity, international development, equestrian sport, youth welfare, agricultural communities. This is not the record of a ceremonial figurehead collecting titles. This is the biography of someone who chose, decade after decade, to do the work. And the work extended far beyond domestic duties. Throughout the latter decades of Queen Elizabeth's reign, and was repeatedly dispatched on missions of genuine diplomatic sensitivity, Commonwealth relationships that needed careful and skilled handling, situations where the wrong approach could cause lasting damage to Britain's international standing. Elizabeth did not send into wave at crowds in easy places. She sent her where things were genuinely complicated and where she trusted in judgment to navigate the difficulty without incident. Over those decades, and accumulated an institutional knowledge and diplomatic literacy that is simply not available in any briefing document or training program. She was there. She saw it happen. She understands why certain things matter in the way that only lived experience can teach. This is the woman Charles called upon when he needed someone he genuinely trusted to carry the weight of the crown during his periods of incapacity. And make no mistake, the need is real. Charles's health challenges have been public knowledge since February 2024, when Buckingham Palace confirmed that the king had been diagnosed with a form of cancer and would be stepping back from public-facing duties while undergoing treatment. It was an admission unprecedented in modern royal history. No previous British monarch had disclosed such personal medical detail to the public in real time. The decision to be transparent was, by most assessments, the right one. The British public responded with genuine sympathy and warmth. But openness about health does not solve the practical challenges that illness creates. The state still needs to function. Documents still need to be signed. The machinery of governance does not pause for medical appointments. The constitutional question, then, was unavoidable. Who carries the load when Charles cannot? William is the obvious answer in theory. He is the heir to the throne, the future king, the next in the succession. But look honestly at William's actual circumstances during this period, and the limits of that obvious answer become apparent. His wife, Catherine, Princess of Wales, disclosed her own cancer diagnosis in March 2024 and has been moving through a deeply serious health recovery of her own. They have 3 young children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, who need their father present and engaged during what is undeniably one of the most destabilizing periods of their young lives. William is also, by any reasonable assessment, carrying an enormous psychological burden. The certain knowledge that kingship is coming, that everything he does now is preparation for a role that will define the rest of his existence. To heap on top of all of that the full administrative weight of a monarch in recovery would not merely stretch William, it could genuinely harm him. And Charles, who understands better than almost anyone what the weight of the crown actually cost a person, is not willing to do that to his son. So he looked elsewhere. And what he found when he looked at and was not just availability, it was something rarer and more valuable. Trustworthiness without ambition. A capacity for real power without any desire to keep it. A person whose entire life has been a demonstration that she understands what the institution requires and is prepared to give it without counting the cost to herself. That quality, the complete absence of dynastic self-interest, is more significant than it might initially appear. In royal politics, the granting of real constitutional authority to a person close to the throne carries inherent risk. Power given to someone with an agenda can be used to advance that agenda. Alliances can be built. Factions can form. The history of European monarchies is littered with cautionary tales about regents and trusted lieutenants who use proximity to the crown to serve themselves rather than the institution, and is immune to that dynamic in a way that is almost structurally guaranteed. She cannot become monarch regardless of circumstances. She has no heirs positioning themselves for succession. Under the old rules of male preference primogeniture that governed the succession when she and Charles were children, she was pushed steadily down the line of succession as her brothers arrived. She accepted that reality with a composure that, in retrospect, tells you everything about her character. She did not campaign against it. She did not cultivate grievances about her place in the family hierarchy. She turned away from the question of position entirely and focused on the question of purpose. That pivot, from position to purpose, is the defining feature of her adult life and the very quality that makes her safe to trust with power. The physical, visible expression of that trust was put on display for the entire world to see on the 6th of May, 2023, when Charles was crowned at Westminster Abbey. In the extraordinary procession that followed the coronation ceremony, as the gold state carriage carried the newly crowned king and queen consort through the streets of London before an audience of tens of millions watching around the globe, the person riding on horseback directly behind that carriage, the first figure in the military procession, the most visible symbol of personal loyalty to the sovereign, was Princess Anne. She had been appointed Gold Stick in Waiting, a role with roots in the reign of King Henry VIII, originally created for the individual the monarch trusted most absolutely with his physical safety. The ceremonial significance of the position has evolved over 5 centuries, but its symbolic meaning has not. When Charles placed Anne in that role on the most important day of his reign, he was making a public, permanent statement about where his trust resides. He was saying it on horseback, in full military uniform, in front of the entire nation. A palace source, speaking to the Mirror at the time of the appointment, confirmed what the gesture communicated, that Charles was rewarding Anne for what they described as her unwavering devotion to duty above all else, and that he values her as a trusted lieutenant. The constellation of honors that Charles has bestowed upon, and since his accession reinforces this reading consistently. Her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, who has stood quietly and without complaint beside and through decades of relentless duty, helping to maintain the stability and infrastructure of their private life so that Anne can dedicate herself without reservation to her public role, has been elevated by Charles to Knight Grand Cross of the Royal Victorian Order. This is the highest rank within an order that the monarch controls entirely, with no government or prime ministerial involvement required. It is a gift from one person to another, a direct expression of personal gratitude and respect. Charles was not merely honoring a lifetime of visible, verifiable, unglamorous work. The constitutional implications of what Charles has done will extend well beyond his own reign. The Councillors of State Act 2022 did not create a temporary arrangement. It created a permanent structural reality. Princess Anne is now embedded in the legal framework of the British monarchy as a lifetime Councillor of State. Her role as Gold Stick in Waiting is an ongoing appointment, not limited to a single coronation ceremony. The groundwork that Queen Elizabeth laid in the final weeks of her own life, the amendment through Parliament, the permanent designation, the legal protection against any future attempt to reverse it, ensures that Anne's position cannot simply be dissolved or ignored when circumstances change. What comes next will depend on how Charles's health continues to evolve, on how William and Catherine navigate their own recoveries and the transition toward eventual kingship, and on how the institution continues to adapt to a world that demands transparency and authenticity from its institutions in ways that previous generations never faced. But at the center of all those unfolding questions stands one figure who did not seek this position, who did not lobby for it, who did not maneuver herself into it through political calculation or strategic relationship building. She simply kept turning up. She kept doing the work. She kept paying the costs that service demands, year after year, decade after decade, without ever presenting an invoice. King Charles looked at all the people around him when the weight became too heavy to carry alone, and he chose the one person whose entire life had been a preparation for